Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our concepts edition where we go over theory, kind of high-level lean concepts, and just what's been happening, what we're thinking about. I'm Devin Bedoni of Like and Precision.
And I'm Uriel Eisen of Austere Manufacturing.
And you're going to rock our pithy quote.
Oh, yes. It's pretty simple. If you have an environment where people aren't afraid to speak up and you listen to them, things will get better. Dave Waters.
Thank you, the internet. Yeah, I like this. It's also like, I don't know, I've been thinking a bunch recently about the Toyota Kata again. I haven't been reading it again, but thinking about it and just how difficult it really is to create that culture of continuous improvement.
It really is.
And I think that's why that book has so much emphasis on it being kind of like the hidden key or the missing link in making lean function. And but it's so hard. It's so hard. It's so hard to, it's so hard.
Yeah. I mean, I've been having it's interesting. We've been diving into a bunch of pretty substantial projects.
Yeah.
That are improvements to the business, but it does not, it's been feeling like we've been falling off of the continuous improvement train in a funny way. Simultaneously, we are spending a ton of time on improvements.
Yeah.
But it's not just what you're doing, it's how you're doing it too. Mm-hmm. And we're sort of up against some deadlines for certain projects that make it
for actual production or for improvement projects?
For improvement projects. So my brother's been helping me. He's basically been doing the project, programming the paint robot. Yeah. And he's leaving in a week. And so it's kind of all right, we need to get this to a point where I can run it and where I understand the code. And, you know, we've solved a lot of problems, but so there's just a deadline there, and it's just easy to get into the shop and everyone jumps right into their big projects. Mm-hmm. And I've been feeling the culture side of it is, I don't know if slipping is probably an overstatement, but less, well, maybe it is, less front of mind, less noticeable.
Yeah.
And then the second I just get in and jump into projects, everyone else is kind of oh, I guess we'll just do production.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
what I've been thinking about is the difficulty in sort of creating the self-directed side of it. What I find tends to happen in our business is I get fired up and instigate some bigger things, or I make a lot of little improvements into the things that I engage with on a daily basis. Right. And not to say that the other people in the shop aren't making improvements on their own, because they are. But yeah, I'm not clearly saying that you value it. And even putting time, dedicating group time towards improvement projects is not enough somehow. And I'm not sure. Also, I'm very impatient, so it hasn't been very long. And maybe this is a thing that, we're not really going to see the fruits of for a few more years, kind of a thing. Or be getting into a stride. But it's just, it's so hard to maintain some of these. Sometimes it just feels silly too when you're we have big projects that we need to tackle, and we have big customer projects out there waiting for us, but let's 3S, and it's kind of there's moments where I think it's hard to keep passing the Kool-Aid around a little bit on stuff like that, where you're I know, this is important. And also, I recognize that this seems silly in this moment. Yeah. Sort of. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I guess I'm sort of thinking about the projects we're working on a little more. It feels like a lot of them are big enough where they're sort of more of an R&D effort, which just feels like a core function of the business, not improving a function of the business, right? In doing those projects, we could spend 30 minutes improving how we do R&D on those projects or something, cleaning up the space,
Yeah.
That's the only thing that comes to mind. Just looking for another example there.
Yeah, similar. We're still working on this tooling thing, and it's definitely become a cascading project in that it's like, which was sort of predictable, right? Like, tooling is involved in pretty much everything we do, right? Like, it's involved in every part we make. It's a large portion of what we move around the shop on a daily basis. It's the majority of what we order and receive. And so, like, all of these tendrils have started to go out, and it's
interesting.
It's realizing that it's actually become quite a significant project.
Because you're sort of like, the systems are bumping into other systems, and you're realizing that those also need to be changed. Or
basically,
okay. So it's like, oh, we'll reorganize this drawer, and then you're like, oh, well, if we do that, now we need to.
Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. Basically, I do think, like, on the improvement side and sort of institutional knowledge side, I think we're learning a lot through this process.
Okay.
Excuse me. So I think that needs to, like, not be undervalued for sure. But yeah, similar feeling where it's like, it doesn't look like what we think of as maybe lean, but I do think it is pretty critical. I mean, obviously it's super critical. Like, we're revamping kind of our whole information management system.
Totally. I guess, like, the thing that maybe we're talking about here is, like, there's a lot of really cool companies who do innovative and clever and efficiency seeking activities that aren't lean, right? Like, there's some discussion about this in the books about, like, it's like it's a methodology, right?
Yeah.
For achieving a result, but it doesn't mean it's the only way of achieving the result. And I feel like both of us were attracted to the books. Like, we picked them up and we're like, yes, like, this is something, like, we were both interested in it already in the general premise of, like, improving systems.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't think, like, just because we are working on things that make improvements, that it is necessarily sort of that we're doing it right in a funny way. You know what I mean? In terms of building that culture.
You're making me uncomfortable.
No, I mean, I don't know. I've sort of been feeling like we talked about it today, where, like, we've sort of fallen off capturing all the ideas for improvements.
Yeah.
Because we were finding, we didn't have enough time to tackle most of them. And that there was sort of this natural sort of, like, the ones that did stick around in everyone's head in the shop tended to be... Critical. I hesitate to say the best, because it's probably some cross-section of seemingly, like, fairly achievable with like high-ish impact.
Urgent as well.
Yeah. So, like, I don't think it's a perfect filter. We used to capture a lot more ideas for improvements, and we've sort of fallen off that, and we've sort of fallen, like, our morning meeting has sort of fallen off because we've been arriving at different times, which I think is a problem you kind of raised a couple weeks back. But yeah, so it feels like a lot of the kind of building blocks of this, like, methodology are kind of, like, not to say that we're not making strides, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know, but also I think there's a degree of regularity that a lot of those methods, I don't know if they, I don't know if it's, which direction it's causal. Like, I don't know if they rely on it or if they create it or some of both. But it feels like a lot of the regularity, like, we went through this crazy production spell, like, into the holidays, and then coming out of the back of that, we were sort of, like, recovering from that, but then also chose that lull, like, early January to tackle a lot of, like, this robot project, anodizing, a huge overhaul of our Kanban system. Anyway, so, like, there's a general upheaval and instability, which probably...
The waste of general chaos and mayhem.
the ninth lean waste.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. I had some kind of cool tidbits from our tooling stuff.
Yeah.
Cool realizations / like, oh my God, we have so much work to do.
Okay.
So a few of the knock-on effects of reorganizing our tool system with this non-intelligent ID number, as we've discussed many times
very
now.
Smart, but not intelligent.
Very smart. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
What's the acronym for that? VSNI. VSNI ID numbers.
Yeah.
So there's lots of cool things, as has been discussed. One thing that's become very clear is that when you have, and I think this is both a great thing and like a potentially very frustrating thing.
Okay.
It's going to sound very obvious, of course, once I say it.
I'm ready.
Once you have an ID number that doesn't match any physical characteristics of the thing that you're looking at,
yeah,
you have to have amazing documentation everywhere that thing travels.
Interesting. That does sound both annoying and awesome.
Yeah. I think it's going to create a lot of things. It's going to force our hand basically into creating a lot of good systems. But like very early on, I'd be like, oh, that tool, I want to measure it. So I'd like pull it out of the bin and then be like, oh,
interesting.
Where does it go back? If there's not another one in there.
Oh God. Right.
So it basically has just become this thing where it's like, okay, a tool can never travel without documentation now.
Without a Kanban, dare I say.
Without a Kanban,
Nothing travels without a Kanban.
So the immediate knee jerk is like, oh my God, what kind of monster have we created?
Right.
The very, very quick after that is like, oh, this is going to be amazing, because now it's going to become like a tool without some form of identification is like a massive red flag, not like that just needs to get sorted kind of a thing. And it's made it clear that we're going to have to develop a pretty robust receiving system. And we've talked.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
We haven't talked for 2 weeks. I mean, we have talked, but like,
yeah,
we are also developing a receiving system. Yeah.
Yeah. Because now it's like, okay, so a tool comes in, it needs to immediately get correlated to an ID number. So that means the person who ordered it also has to have created that ID number when they ordered it, so that those two things can link up when the physical thing arrives. Yeah. Which is kind of cool.
And so like normally the tool does have, unless it's a very small tool, does have some info on the side.
Yeah. So you could go look it up.
Okay. So it's not like you're going to be throwing away.
No. It's not like we're going to throw away tools. No, it's just annoying.
Yeah. Annoying enough that you may as well get it right.
Yeah. Get it right.
That's cool.
Or like in worst case scenario, like because we don't have a lot of the physical documentation built out yet, like I'll pull a tool out and just Sharpie on the side of it what its ID number is if I have to like take it to my bench to.
Gotcha.
Because we're still in this process of like creating IDs, or in this instance, I was like doing some ridiculous part that required a ridiculous stick out. And I was like, I need to go measure how much of this tool I can actually stick out of this holder kind of a thing.
Always a good time.
Which is an edge case, clearly.
Yeah.
And then another knock-on effect, which has been kind of interesting, is now that like an ID is a very specific thing. Not sort of like this is a 3/8 3 flute with a corner rad, and all of the 3/8 3 flutes with a corner rad end up in that bin, and you can kind of
be like, yeah, I use this one.
We usually use this one mostly. Yeah, but that one's there just in case. Now it's like you go to that bin. Yeah. If that tool is empty, it's not like you can just pick the other tool in the bin or look next door to the other tool and be like, can I maybe use this one? So now, like, there's a very strong impetus to keep tools in stock. Right. And many of which we don't have in stock, which we didn't really know before because there was a bin with some stuff in it. And now there's an ID bin. You're like, there's nothing in there. I guess we need to order that. Interesting. And a lot of the things didn't have Kanbans.
And so that makes me wonder, though, do you need all of those tools?
Not necessarily, but
like, are you just going to build a system that's like, oh, now we need to buy like $800 worth of could be more, $1,500 of carbide.
I think we're definitely going to be ordering several $1,000s worth of carbide.
But you've been doing fine without it, or
sort of.
Okay.
Yeah. Huh. I think it's more like I've been patching holes as they become evident, like in the moment.
The ninth lean waste of chaos keeps you from seeing like why, kind of, or something?
Sort of. Or it's like, this part's coming up, go check the drawer. Oh, we don't have that size drill, I'll order that drill. Not like everything. We're trying to get to a point where everything that has we're not like IDing every single tool in the shop. For example, I have like a bin of random metric drills, high-speed steel that I bought for some job 10 years ago that are like in 0.1 increments. And it's kind of like, that's not something we use on a daily basis or need to have available. We're not going to create an ID for every one of those and have duplicates and backups. But every tool that we do use, we're going to have an ID number for. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that just kind of got stuck in the manual mill, like drawer as like, whatever, use it when you need it kind of a thing. So we are trying to be somewhat cognizant of not like just building out this crazy inventory that now we have to manage. But
And is there any reason, and maybe I'm just distracting you from what you're trying to talk about. Is there any reason, like, is there a scenario where some tools you want to have in the system, but you don't necessarily need to have in stock if they are marked as such? You know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, we have this job coming up, and if there was a convenient way to see that it wasn't an inventoried tool, but was a standard tool.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know how we would do that right now because there's no like back feed into the Fusion library. And
I remember, I think Grimsmo was talking a long time ago about like taking a tool out of the side of a kern and then being like, which pocket did it go back into? And so I think he 3D printed like a little
holder or
a little thing that stuck in there.
Yeah.
I wonder if that would be useful in your drawers to have like just a little red ball you could drop into a bin when you take something out or something, you know what I mean? Or like so you could carry something over to your desk.
As a short term.
And then you get back and you take the thing out or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I think I want to get to a point where anything that's available in the tool library is available in real life instead of having a mismatch there.
Interesting. But I could see efficiencies in having pre-built out tools.
Yeah.
But not really needing them frequently.
Right. That's where and we're getting into the weeds again here, but our like theoretical standard, non-standard. Standard, non-standard is like, we have, and we don't actually have all the infrastructure to be putting this into place yet. So it's very much a theory. But our concept is standard tools are tools that remain built up in holders. Like we have one for each machine in theory. They're ready to go at a moment's notice kind of a thing. And then there's just like tools in the bin, in the drawers and holders that can be built up into different combinations and I want that to reflect the library. So that they are
So it's funny. I feel like, I don't know if there's anyone listening to this episode at the moment who is not into machining after that, but if there is, I think like the problem is, it's funny, we've been facing a similar problem. It's one of like, we have a lot of stuff in the shop or what, I mean, you run into this with like file naming conventions, right? And there's sort of two things that seem at odds, but they're not exactly, which is like that ID versus the name kind of. Yeah, we've run into the same. We had the conversation around Kanban and naming Kanban and if it needs to be unique, really. But at the end of the day, if you do have one unique number that has nothing to do with the item, that's fine, right? And it is interesting. It really does drive a lot of like good sort of like, I don't know what, like data, like
best practices.
Yeah. Like you can't just kind of fudge it. Right. Which is really annoying, but leads to a much, just a much clearer system, I guess. Yeah. And like an easily documented system.
Yeah.
And there's none of the like there's no room for like, oh yeah, with this one I normally just like whatever. It's like, no, what does it say on the tag?
Yeah, totally. Where I'm trying to get with this, I guess, is to answer the question of like, why have every bin remain full, is like I want the ordering process to be something that doesn't have to be tied to the programming or job planning process. Because that leads to waste or what? Yeah, that leads to like it leads to a lot of unnecessary communication or a job needing to start and not having tools on hand. So I'd like to have whoever's programming parts just be like, this is what we have. to work with. If we need to order something new, we can order something new and create an ID and go through the whole process of, creating Kanban for it and the whole deal. But that's a choice, and that's like we're adding to our official library, and then to have someone else just be able to have Kanban maintained or tooling inventory maintained by Kanban, instead of it just being like me being like, well, I think that job's coming up. Let me go check the print and make sure we have everything on hand that we need. Because as soon as that's out of my hands, like, it's going to fall apart. That the current system wherein I'm going and checking to make sure we have stuff because I'm thinking a week ahead.
No, totally. That's not a great system, but I could imagine a system where whoever's programming pulls up a Fusion tool library of standard tools that are in the shop, and then it's like, oh, we don't have that, and then they go over to the library that isn't, and they pull from that, and they just like mark it or issue a Kanban that is in the bin, and just there's no tools in it or something. Yeah, it does get kind of disorganized because
the timelines get weird.
They get weird, and then also I'm thinking on the back end, I'd be curious, like, what are you doing if you bring in a special tool? What happens to it? Does it automatically get an ID?
That's what I'm trying to get to.
Kanban? Yeah. And then automatically get reordered, even if it's like some really wacko, like weird tool?
Probably.
Interesting. I guess because it wouldn't get reordered unless it got broken. Like, you could set the minimum to 1.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be the idea.
And then what happens like to... in 80 years, no. But like, how does that, like, is there a process for phasing out tools, or you're just anticipating kind of?
I don't know yet.
Like, even switching providers, like 3/8 from.
Yeah. I think that's something that we'll just handle on the Kanban side.
Okay.
As long as it had the same stats.
Right.
And they're fairly standardized for the most part. Yeah. I have not. Like, there is in 80 years, potentially the tool cabinet is massive, and there's a bunch of stuff just sitting there that doesn't get reordered and doesn't get used.
Right.
So the answer is, right now we don't have a way to flag that, but I feel like...
Here's a way to flag it. Okay, so, well, unless you have other stuff to
add. No, just that this is forcing us, one of the other knock-on effects is forcing us to digitize our Kanban creation system, which is, I think, maybe where you're going.
That's exactly right. So I've been going hard on the Kanban. I've started talking to a bunch of people. So we basically built out this thing internally. I think I've been talking about it.
Yeah.
Digital backend to Kanban to sort of deal with some of the issues we've run into around creating them, around just like you don't have any data with Kanban, which is lean data says don't collect unless you need it. So like, I'm not saying we should be collecting all the data, but things like how frequently do we order this?
Yeah.
Theoretically, that should be easy to find. And like, some people end up like scrolling through, like looking at a vendor and like counting up, oh, we ordered it that day and that, stuff like that. So that's kind of, anyway, so now with that digital backend, we are always scanning back into the system and then clicking order from there.
Yeah.
And so like, you could very easily, as you build out the Kanban side of it, add that.
Yeah.
And then you could even create a filter of like anything that hasn't been ordered within a year, right?
Yeah.
You could easily like generate that report.
Yeah.
And then be like, I'm not going to order those, like let's deal with those. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're still very much on the uphill side of the climb.
Yeah.
Where we are trying to like sort of reach parity with our needs, I think.
Yeah.
But thinking forward to the other side when we have become bloated and how to come back from that.
Tool wise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Is a good thing to keep in mind. And it's definitely come up of like, what will this look like a decade from now?
Right.
How many drawers are we going to have here?
Yeah. Interesting. Right. Cool. So a few things on the Kanban journey. Firstly,
words of wisdom, big lessons.
It's been like we've been working hard at it. I think It's very clear to me. Well, if you look at like Toyota and a lot of other big companies that use Kanban, they also have a digital side.
Yeah.
And I think that is sort of the best of both worlds. I think an ERP, I'd be very curious to know where there's like an exceptional implementation of an ERP where it sort of delivers on all fronts.
I think one thing that, sorry, I'm interrupting, but like this, like we were talking about with ID numbers of things not traveling without physical documentation. If you don't have that physical documentation, i.e. Kanban card for anything, right?
Yeah.
Anything that moves, you have to have just like scanners everywhere,
right?
And incredible, what's the word? Your people working and engaging with the physical things have to be incredibly good at scanning constantly so that the information is real. Whereas when physical things travel, then.
And I think that gets back to our quote. Like, I think ERPs are often implemented in a command and control environment where like KPIs are actually often not a great way of managing, because like you can imagine if it was like, hey, what's your machine uptime? You're going to figure out which barcodes you're meant to scan to get a good report, right? Like, and make it seem like someone else's problem or something. So I think like if you scrap a part, are you tracking that you just cut an extra part? And then if your manager comes and like talks to you about that, like next time maybe you don't.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know where that went. Anyway, so like, some big wins. I think definitely having the scan always go back into the system. That has definitely, we would like standardized to that.
I have a little tidbit about that.
Oh yeah,
about touch points, because we kind of talked about that last episode, I think. And just how critical it is to have these touch points with automation systems in general, I think.
Yeah.
I got a email from a company that I have a subscription to.
Okay.
And it was like, your account's past due, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is on auto pay. What's this about? So I emailed them to get it cleared up. I was like, before I actually pay this again, I want to make sure it didn't go through. And they're like, oh, no, we had this blip in our system, our automation was set for your reset on this date, but at the beginning of the year, I think.
Okay.
I didn't follow all the details. The point of it was that like.
And so you were current on the payment?
I was current, yeah. The point of this was just that like, and like no fault on them, but I'm sure that I was not the only person that this happened to.
Right.
I'm sure that they have a lot of customers.
Yeah.
And so like the fact that there wasn't a touch point meant that like somebody or several somebodies were probably very busy handling emails and checking accounts for multiple days at a time. Now the question is like, in the long run, probably it saved them more time than this cost.
Right.
But then there's also the disruption to their customers and like a loss of confidence there. And like just thinking through these sorts of things happening in other places, like if this was a more severe sort of thing, what that could look like. And it just kind of this happened this morning. It just kind of drove the point home that like having these touch points where a person like views and says yes or no, like getting your automation to 98% and then you click the button.
Totally.
So key.
Yeah. Anyway, so we've been messing around quite a bit with that. There's like, it's interesting trying to walk the line of like, there's all this stuff you can do with it suddenly. I mean, like one of the cool ones, which I'm not sure it's quite implemented yet, but it is not too complex, is doing price comparisons when you go to buy something. Like we can check a few vendors like immediately and then just be like, here's the cheapest price today. Yeah. And so it just feels like the pure paper Kanban is awesome. And if that, like, I think there's two tasks basically in the shop for Kanban. One is moving information around, and then the other, which sort of isn't really Kanban, but it is often treated as such, is the ordering side of things, right? Like that triggers a reorder, but there's another system that should exist for placing those orders. Yeah. because it's really time consuming. Right, like having a huge stack of Kanban on your desk when you get there in the morning.
Demoralizing.
Well, it's a huge win from a like no one needed to walk over and tell you, no one needed to write it on a whiteboard or forget or whatever. Like
the system efficiency is going up.
It's huge.
Yeah.
But then there's this back end of like, oh my God, like let me just leaf through them and figure out which ones are actually urgent because the rest I'm not doing today kind of thing. Uh-huh. That's what was happening for me anyway. So we've taken care of all that. And made it a lot more efficient. So that's pretty exciting. I did want to mention we launched a website for free Kanban generator thing called kanbunny.com. If you're curious about the name, send me a DM. Anyway, kanbunny.com, you can type in your info and it will generate a QR code. It's just something like before building out this system, I was struggling a lot with where I'd write it out manually, like with a Sharpie, and then I'm like, I really want a QR code to just like reorder it very quickly. Yeah. So then I'd go to the computer, I'd go to like whatever QR code generator, download it, print it, stick it on. It's kind of a process. So this just does it all in one tool. We are kind of like curious if other businesses are interested in the database we built on to support the Kanban stuff. So if people are, drop us a line. We're thinking about just trying to figure out if people are interested and then what that might look like. Because it has been, we've been working on it pretty full on for like, weeks. And so, so it would be kind of cool to get it out to other small businesses. It kind of occurred to me like, I don't think a lot of businesses sort of have a good solution, and I haven't seen a good software solution out there.
For just creating Kanban?
No, for creating Kanban and then the ordering side and like automating that whole process and then like giving you the wins of the efficiency of the ordering without the hassle of an ERP. Yeah. Like I've been talking to a bunch of businesses and just walking around, and a lot of them are like have a POS system because they do some retail, and on the back end of that tool, like there's all of this capability, but it's really, really like kind of, it becomes like you are running that system instead of that system. You're supporting that system instead of that system supporting your business in a funny way. So people are like, well, I don't really want to enter all of the information because we change products like next week, like we just go to Costco and buy, anyway, so it just doesn't make a ton of sense there. So, trying to think what other cool improvements we've put in there. But I guess that's next week's episode actually. Yeah. So
any like big I guess you kind of went over the big takeaways or like hard lessons learned.
The big takeaways, I don't know. I'm pretty fired up about like what Kanban coupled with a simple, well, it's not simple, but coupled with like, I should say the interaction is simple, right? Like day to day, you just scan a Kanban and that sort of drives everything. Yeah. Like you can, like now we have it, like it shows you a timeline of your orders, right? So like when you scan one, if you scroll all the way down, it shows you when you ordered that item. Yeah. And we're working on like creating carts out of it. It just takes care of a lot of the, I guess what were downstream sort of processes that happen. Like once a Kanban lands somewhere, it's triggering something, right? It's triggering a reorder. It's triggering production, so those things can be digital. Yeah. Without it, I was kind of like, if we digitize it, we're going to get into ERP land. And I think a few weeks back, we sort of like brushed up against ERP land. It was like, oh, and you can get this data in there and that data. And suddenly it's like scan at every single process and scan when you start and scan when you stop, which is all stuff you could add to it. But I think it's important that it's like in service of your business instead of like you sort of start just doing stuff to serve the software.
To serve the data.
The data gods, yeah. Anyhow,
there'd be dragons there.
Yes. So
cool.
On that note,
I think that's a good spot to wrap up for today.
Yeah. Thanks all for listening, as always. We do have a Patreon. Please consider supporting us if you're enjoying following along. You can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com on the internet. The Kanban generator is kanbunny.com. That's KANBUNNY.com.
And you can find me at lichen_MFG on Instagram, lichenprecision.com on the internet, and the pod at incremental CI on Instagram. And we will talk to you soon.